In the crisp, biting cold of an Alaskan morning, a group of fishermen haul in their nets expecting the usual catch. But as the icy water drips away, something unexpected glints among the tangled mess of fish and seaweed. A watch, encrusted with barnacles, yet distinctly recognizable. 20 years had passed since anyone last saw that watch, wrapped around the wrist of a man who once soared high above these very waters. Before the watch became a relic of mystery, it belonged to Captain Jack Reynolds, a devoted rescue pilot with the Alaskan Air National Guard. Jack was a man of the skies, known for his unwavering bravery and a heart as vast as the wilderness he flew over. To his family, he was a loving husband, a doting father, and a reliable friend. To those he rescued, he was a guardian angel. Born and raised amidst the rugged mountains of Anchorage, Jack developed a love for aviation early on. His parents often marveled at how their son could identify any aircraft by sound alone. He grew up with a boundless curiosity and a natural talent for flying, eventually dedicating his life to saving others from the perilous Alaskan terrain. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, Jack was restless. His wife, Emily, noticed his late-night pacing, the way his gaze often lingered on the horizon. Yet, he shrugged off her concerns, attributing it to the demands of his job. Little did anyone know these subtle changes were the prelude to a mystery that would haunt them all. The day of the disappearance was like any other. Jack was called for a rescue mission, an emergency medevac for a hiker stranded in the remote Alaskan wilderness. The skies were clear, the morning sun casting a golden hue over the snow-capped peaks. Jack gave Emily a reassuring smile as he kissed her goodbye, promising to be home by dinner. As he ascended into the sky, his voice crackled over the radio, calm and confident. But just hours later, that reassuring voice would vanish into the static, leaving behind a silence that stretched on for 2 decades. When Jack's helicopter failed to return, and neither he nor his aircraft were found, search efforts proved fruitless. It was as if the Alaskan wilderness had swallowed him whole. Emily's world shattered with each passing day of uncertainty. Friends and family rallied around her, but the absence of answers was a constant aching void. The community held on to hope, but as months turned into years, Jack Reynolds became a ghost story, a chilling reminder of the unforgiving nature of the Alaskan frontier. Now, 2 decades later, the watch tells a new story, a whisper from the depths, beckoning us to unravel the mystery of what truly happened on that fateful day. As the fishermen stand in awe, a call is made, a call that reignites an investigation long thought cold, sparking a journey into the unknown. Do you copy? It's the voice of the past, breaking through the silence, demanding to be heard. Jack Reynolds was more than just a pilot. He was a lifeline for those trapped in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness. The son of a career Air Force officer, Jack grew up with the hum of aircraft engines in his ears and the vast sky as his playground. His childhood was a mosaic of military bases, each one a new chapter in his young life. But it was the rugged beauty of Alaska that captured his heart. His colleagues described him as a man of unwavering resolve, someone who could navigate the most treacherous of conditions with a steady hand and an unyielding spirit. Jack had a reputation for going above and beyond, a hero to many who owed their lives to his courage and skill. But beneath his composed exterior lay a man deeply committed to his family, cherishing every moment with his wife, Emily, and their 2 young children. On the day of his disappearance, Jack awoke before dawn, his mind already on the mission ahead. The call had come in during the early hours, a hiker injured and alone, stranded on a remote trail with time running out. Jack's sense of duty outweighed the risks. He was known for saying that every rescue was a race against the clock, and he refused to lose. As he prepared for the flight, he went through his pre-flight checks meticulously, his concentration absolute. His last words to Emily echoed in her mind, a promise to be home by dinner, his voice warm and reassuring, masking any hint of the unease that lingered in the air. Once airborne, Jack's helicopter cut through the crisp morning air with precision. The vast expanse of Alaska unfolded below, a tapestry of snow-draped mountains and dense forests. Radio contact was established with the base, his voice steady as he relayed his position and intentions. Everything seemed routine, Just another day in the life of a rescue pilot. But as the minutes ticked by, the world below was shrouded in mystery. The radio fell silent, Jack's voice swallowed by the wilderness that had become his second home. When the helicopter failed to arrive at its destination, alarms were raised. An immediate search ensued, scouring the vast wilderness for any trace of Jack or his aircraft. Yet despite the extensive efforts, there was nothing. No wreckage, no beacon, no sign of life. Emily's desperation grew with each unanswered call, each hour that stretched into eternity. The initial 911 call was frantic, filled with disbelief and fear, the operator's voice calm yet laced with urgency as they reassured her that every measure was being taken. But as search teams combed through the wilderness, hope began to wane. The dense forests and unpredictable weather formed a formidable barrier, and after weeks of exhaustive searching, the operation was reluctantly scaled back. Jack Reynolds had become another mystery of the Alaskan wilds, a story left unfinished. Now, 20 years later, the worn hands of a fisherman cradle a watch, Jack's watch, a beacon from the past, dredged from the ocean's depths. It's a sign, a clue that reignites a flicker of hope and curiosity, a call to uncover the truth buried beneath 2 decades of silence. As the news reaches Emily, her heart quickens with a mix of fear and anticipation. The watch is a whisper from Jack, a reminder that somewhere, amidst the secrets of the deep, the answer to his disappearance awaits. And with it, the promise of closure, of understanding, and perhaps the final chapter in a story that began with a hero's flight into the unknown. Emily's eyes linger on the photo of Jack, his confident smile frozen in time, as the weight of the past 20 years presses heavily on her shoulders. The discovery of the watch brings an unexpected mixture of emotions, and as she places a call to the authorities, the memories of those first harrowing days come rushing back. The initial police response to Jack's disappearance was swift, yet riddled with the chaos of uncertainty. The base had contacted the local authorities, who quickly mobilized search and rescue teams. Helicopters were dispatched, and ground teams were assembled, each member briefed with the gravity of finding one of their own. The clock was ticking, and every passing minute felt like a lifetime. Key witnesses were scarce. The last person to see Jack was a fellow pilot who waved him off, their exchange no more than a nod of mutual respect. The radio operators had heard his final transmission, a calm and routine check-in, before the static swallowed his voice. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Emily remembers the flurry of activity in those early hours, how the house became a hub of hope and despair. Friends and family gathered, their presence a comfort yet a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. Each ring of the phone was a brief jolt of hope, only to be dashed by updates that revealed nothing new. In the midst of the chaos, critical early mistakes were made. The search radius was initially too narrow, based on assumptions of his last known location. The unpredictable Alaskan weather, a formidable adversary, was underestimated, and as days turned into nights, the urgency began to wane. The investigators, pressured by a growing media frenzy, struggled to maintain composure. In their haste, they overlooked a crucial detail: a report of a low-flying helicopter sighting by a local fisherman, dismissed as unreliable without further inquiry. It was a decision that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Emily's heart aches with the memory of those early days, the unanswered questions, the fraying hope, and the relentless passage of time. The discovery of the watch now reignites her determination, a spark of possibility that the truth might still be within reach. As she waits for the detective to pick up, the promise of new leads and uncharted paths fills her with a renewed sense of purpose. The watch is more than a relic of the past. It's a tangible piece of Jack, urging her to delve deeper into the mystery that has shadowed her life. When the detective finally answers, his voice is steady, yet tinged with a hint of excitement. The news of the watch has breathed new life into the cold case, and with it, the prospect of revisiting those early days with fresh eyes. They agree to meet, to pore over old files and re-examine every piece of evidence, searching for the thread that could unravel the truth. As Emily hangs up, her resolve hardens. The first 48 hours may have been marred by missteps and missed opportunities, but the next 48 could change everything. The watch is a beacon, guiding her through the fog of uncertainty, and as she prepares to face the past once more, the question lingers. What else lies beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered? The phone call ends, and Emily sits in silence, the weight of the past pressing down on her. Her mind drifts back to those first frantic days, the sense of urgency that had filled the air like a static charge. The initial police response had been swift, but flawed. The morning after Jack's disappearance, the local precinct had been buzzing with activity. Officers shuffled papers, fielded calls, and organized search parties. But amidst the chaos, critical details slipped through the cracks. Emily remembers the lead investigator's words, delivered with a mix of empathy and detachment. "We're doing everything we can, ma'am. The terrain is challenging, and the weather isn't on our side." Jack's colleagues from the rescue unit were some of the first key witnesses interviewed. They painted a picture of a seasoned pilot, meticulous and cautious, a man whose dedication to saving others was unparalleled. Yet, there was something in their eyes, an unspoken fear that perhaps Jack had been pushing himself too hard, taking on more than was wise. Emily's family gathered, their presence both a comfort and a reminder of the growing dread. Her father, a stoic figure, insisted on joining the search, his experience as a retired ranger invaluable. Emily's mother, the picture of quiet strength, held vigil at home, ensuring the children were shielded from the worst of the storm. But as the hours ticked by, early mistakes began to surface. The search area, based on flawed assumptions, was too narrow. The rough seas and dense forests were given only cursory glances. And then there was the report, a low-flying helicopter sighted by that fisherman, dismissed by the lead investigator as a distraction. Probably just another tourist, he had reasoned, waving it off as unimportant. Emily recalls how the media descended like vultures, their cameras and questions an intrusion into her grief. Headlines speculated wildly, each story more sensational than the last, adding pressure to an already strained investigation. The police, under scrutiny, doubled down on their initial assumptions rather than pivoting to explore new leads. Back in the present, Emily knows these early missteps are critical. The detective agrees. Uncovering what was overlooked could be the key to unraveling the mystery. They meet in a dimly lit conference room, the walls lined with boxes of evidence, photographs pinned to corkboards, timelines scrawled across whiteboards. The detective speaks, his voice calm but edged with determination. "First, we need to revisit every witness statement, especially those dismissed as unreliable. That fisherman's report, it could have been the break we needed, and we can't afford to overlook it again." Emily nods, her heart pounding with renewed urgency. As they sift through the files, a question lingers, gnawing at the edges of their resolve. What other truths were buried in the haste of those first 48 hours? The answer could lie in the details, those tiny, overlooked fragments of reality that now, with the discovery of the watch, demand to be seen in a new light. The clock ticks on, and as the detective and Emily delve deeper, a sense of hope flickers, a belief that this time they might finally uncover what truly happened to Jack. But as they turn the pages, another question looms large. If they find the truth, will it be the answer they've been seeking? Or a revelation that alters everything they thought they knew? In the dim glow of the conference room, the detective and Emily pore over the statements, each page a whisper from the past. The detective's pen taps rhythmically against the table, a steady drumbeat underscoring their determination. "We start with the night Jack disappeared," he says, flipping open a file. "The air traffic control logs. There was a radar blip they couldn't identify, dismissed as a glitch." Emily leans in, eyes scanning the lines of data. "A glitch they never followed up on," she murmurs. "And then there's the weather report, a sudden storm front that came out of nowhere." The detective nods, a flicker of frustration passing across his face. It was chaotic. The control tower was overwhelmed, communications garbled. But someone saw something. Someone always does. They turn to the witness statements, the pages filled with hurried scribbles and crossed-out lines. Key witnesses, their recollections a tangled mess of half-remembered details. A waitress at a nearby diner who served Jack his last meal, her account dismissed because she was too emotional. She said Jack seemed restless, kept checking his watch, Emily recalls, but they shrugged it off, said she was imagining things because she liked him. The detective sets the paper aside, his brow furrowed. And the fisherman, his report about the helicopter. It was night, visibility low, but he was certain about what he saw. A chopper, moving erratically as if searching for something. Emily's voice is soft, but determined. They never even questioned him properly, did they? Just put it down to the night playing tricks on his eyes. The detective shakes his head, frustration evident. Too many assumptions, too much pressure to chalk it up as an accident. They were overwhelmed, maybe even understaffed, but the truth is they missed the threads that could have led us here sooner. As they speak, Emily's phone buzzes, a message from her brother Matt. She glances down, the words a jolt to her system. Family's gathering tonight. Mom wants you there. She looks up, determination etched in her features. We can't let this slip away again. We need to revisit everything, speak to these people ourselves. The detective nods, his agreement unspoken but clear. We start with the waitress and the fisherman, and that blip on the radar. It's not a glitch until we prove it. With renewed resolve, they continue their review, the weight of the first 48 hours pressing down like a relentless tide. The mistakes of the past loom large, but there's a flicker of hope, a belief that this time they might finally illuminate the darkness that claimed Jack all those years ago. As the clock ticks on in the quiet room, Emily and the detective know the truth is out there, hidden in the shadows of what was overlooked. But as they stand on the precipice of revelation, another question haunts them. What price will they pay for the answers they seek? And as Emily prepares for the gathering with her family, she wonders, how will they face the truths that are about to emerge? Emily's mind raced as she drove toward her family's home. The message from her brother had been clear. Tonight's gathering was not just a familial obligation, but a pivotal moment in their collective quest for truth. The chill of the Alaskan evening seeped into her bones, a stark reminder of the cold case that had haunted them for decades. As she pulled into the driveway, the house stood solemnly against the dimming sky, its windows aglow with the warmth of family inside. Entering, she was greeted by the familiar, comforting chaos of her siblings and the quiet resilience of her mother, who had spent years searching for closure. The room was filled with murmurs of conversation, each voice carrying the weight of 20 years of uncertainty. Her brother Matt approached her, his expression a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Glad you made it," he said, a hint of relief softening his features. "Mom's been anxious all day." Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the room, settling on the faces she knew so well. "We have to get everyone on the same page," she said. "There's too much at stake." As they gathered around the table, the atmosphere shifted, an unspoken acknowledgement of the significance of this meeting. Emily took a deep breath, recounting her recent discoveries with the detective, the overlooked witnesses, and the radar blip that had been dismissed too easily. Each detail was a thread, and together they began to weave a tapestry of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Her mother listened intently, her eyes clouded with memories. "I remember that night," she said softly. "There were whispers around town, people saying all sorts of things, but no one ever really knew what happened." Matt leaned forward, his voice laced with frustration. "There was a guy in town back then, Frank Johnson. He was always around the docks, always seemed to know more than he let on. People used to say he had a hand in everything, but nothing ever stuck." Emily frowned, her mind racing to connect the dots. "Do you think he could be involved? Did anyone ever question him?" Her mother shook her head. "The police looked into him, but he had an alibi. He was out of town that week, supposedly." The room fell silent, the weight of dead ends pressing down on them like a suffocating fog. Emily could sense the frustration mounting, the feeling of hope slipping through their fingers like sand. The investigation had hit a wall, and the community had been quick to latch onto rumors, eager to fill the void left by unanswered questions. Just then, a voice broke through the silence. Emily's younger sister Sarah, who had been quietly listening from the corner. "What about the pilot who flew with Dad sometimes? There were rumors about him too. People said he owed a lot of money, was in deep with some bad people. Emily felt a flicker of intrigue. What's his name? Sarah hesitated, her eyes meeting Emily's. Tommy Reed. But no one could ever prove anything. Emily nodded slowly, her mind spinning with the new information. The investigation might have hit a wall, but the family's determination was unwavering. As they sat together, their collective resolve hardened into a silent vow. This time, they would not let the truth slip away. The night wore on, conversations dwindling into quiet reflections, but Emily's mind remained restless. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but as she looked around the room at the faces of those who had stood by her side, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the gathering drew to a close, Matt pulled Emily aside, his voice a low whisper. "Do you think we can really do this? Find out what happened to Dad?" Emily met his gaze, her eyes filled with determination. "We have to try, Matt. For him, for us, for everyone who needs to know the truth." But as she left the warmth of her family behind and stepped into the cold night, a haunting question lingered at the edges of her mind. How deep did the secrets run, and what would they uncover when the walls finally came down? The cold night air wrapped around Emily as she stepped onto the porch, her breath visible in the dim glow of the porch light. The quiet outside was a stark contrast to the buzz of conversation that had filled the house, and she took a moment to collect her thoughts. Tommy Reed. The name lingered in her mind, a potential thread to pull in the tangled mess of mystery. The next morning, Emily reached out to an old contact who had once worked with her father at the airfield. The man, gruff yet kind, remembered Tommy Reed well. "Tommy was a decent pilot," he said over the phone, "but he had a knack for getting himself into trouble, always seemed to be looking over his shoulder." Emily pressed for more, hoping for a lead. "Did anyone ever mention him being involved in anything questionable?" The man hesitated before answering. There were whispers. Some said he gambled too much, others thought he had ties to some unsavory characters. But nothing ever stuck. "He vanished around the same time as your dad, you know." Emily felt a jolt of surprise. Another disappearance, another layer to the puzzle. "He vanished too?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Not in the same way," the man replied. "He just packed up and left one day. Said he was going to start fresh somewhere else, but who really knows?" The conversation left Emily with more questions than answers. She thanked the man and hung up, her mind racing. Tommy Reed might not be the answer, but he was certainly part of the story. As days turned into weeks, the investigation seemed to waver, the initial flurry of activity giving way to a frustrating lull. The local police, overwhelmed and understaffed, found themselves chasing shadows, their resources stretched thin. Rumors began to swirl through the community, each more outlandish than the last. Some speculated that Van had staged his own disappearance, while others whispered of government conspiracies. Emily found herself mired in the thick of it, trying to separate fact from fiction. She spent hours sifting through old records, tracking down anyone who might have known her father or Tommy Reed. But every lead seemed to lead to another dead end, and the weight of it all began to take its toll. One afternoon, she met with an old friend of her father's, a retired pilot who had flown rescue missions alongside him. His eyes were clouded with age, but they sparked with recognition as he spoke of Van. "Your dad was a good man, Emily. Always had a knack for finding people. It's a damn shame he couldn't find his way back to us." The conversation drifted to Tommy Reed, and the old pilot shook his head. "Tommy was trouble, but if he had anything to do with Van's disappearance, he'd have left tracks. Someone would have seen something." Emily nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. She thanked the pilot and left, her resolve faltering as the days grew shorter and colder. With each passing week, the case began to feel more and more like a distant echo, the community's interest waning as new stories took center stage. Emily felt the urgency slipping away, the investigation hitting a wall that seemed insurmountable. But even in the darkest moments, Emily refused to relinquish hope. She knew that somewhere, buried beneath layers of secrets and silence, the truth awaited, and she vowed to uncover it, no matter how long it took. As she stood at the edge of the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks, she made a silent promise to her father. She would find the answers, for him, for her family, for everyone who needed to know the truth. The waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks, mirroring the storm within Emily's heart. As she turned away from the ocean, a new determination set her course. Yet the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, and the shadows of the past loomed large. Back in the small, tight-knit town, rumors circulated like wildfire. Murmurs of foul play and whispered accusations pointed fingers at anyone who had once crossed paths with Van. The air was thick with suspicion, and Emily found herself in the eye of this swirling storm. One name surfaced repeatedly: Carl Jenkins, a former mechanic who had worked on Van's aircraft. Known for his temper and a penchant for gambling, Carl's reputation made him an easy target for the community's suspicions. Emily decided to pay him a visit, hoping to glean any information that might shed light on her father's disappearance. The meeting was tense. Carl's eyes darted around nervously as Emily approached him in the dimly lit bar where he spent most of his days. When she mentioned her father's name, his demeanor shifted, a defensive wall erecting itself in an instant. "I didn't have nothing to do with Van's disappearance," he bristled, his voice a mix of anger and fear. "People like to talk, but they don't know the first damn thing about what happened." Emily pressed him gently but firmly. "What do you know then? Anything could help." Carl shook his head, frustration etched into his features. "All I know is that Van had enemies, more than you'd think. People who didn't like him poking around where he shouldn't." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Enemies? Like who?" But Carl clammed up, unwilling or unable to divulge more. He muttered something about minding his own business and retreated to the safety of the bar, leaving Emily with more questions than answers. As the days slipped by, the investigation stagnated. The initial suspects, like Carl, were either cleared or unwilling to cooperate, and the trail grew colder with each passing moment. The community, once abuzz with theories and intrigue, began to turn its attention elsewhere. New scandals and fresh mysteries took the spotlight, and Van's disappearance faded to the background of collective memory. Despite the setbacks, Emily refused to give in. She pored over every scrap of information, every whisper of a lead, determined to honor her promise. But the isolation of her quest weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the frustration of dead ends gnawed at her resolve. One evening, as she sat amidst a clutter of files and fading photographs, a name caught her eye. A name she hadn't considered before: Jake Holloway, another pilot who had flown with Van, known for his adventurous spirit and unexplained wealth. He had left town shortly after Van vanished and hadn't been heard from since. Perhaps this was the thread she needed to pull. With renewed purpose, Emily decided to track down Jake, her instincts urging her forward. Little did she know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would finally crack the case wide open. But as she prepared to delve into Jake's world, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, and danger lurked just beneath the surface. As Emily embarked on her quest to find Jake Holloway, the years continued to pass, each one laden with the weight of unanswered questions and unrelenting sorrow. Van's family struggled through the long silence that stretched into decades, their lives marked by the absence of closure. His wife Sarah clung to the hope that her husband might still return, while their children grew up with only faded memories of a father they barely knew. Every year, on the anniversary of Van's disappearance, the family gathered by the shoreline, throwing flowers into the ocean in a silent plea for answers that never came. Sarah's eyes would scan the horizon, searching for a sign, any sign, that Van was out there somewhere, waiting to come home. The town, once gripped by the mystery, had moved on. New faces filled the community, and the story of the vanished rescue pilot became a whispered legend, a cautionary tale told to newcomers over warm cups of coffee. Yet for those who had known Van, the disappearance left a void that never quite healed. Sarah, refusing to succumb to despair, hired private investigators over the years, each promising breakthroughs that inevitably led to dead ends. She even turned to psychics, desperately hoping for revelations from beyond. All the while, the official investigation lay dormant, files gathering dust in a forgotten cabinet, a testament to the passage of time and the fading of urgency. Meanwhile, Emily's personal investigation continued in the shadows. She scoured records, made phone calls, and traveled to distant towns, always with Jake Holloway in her sights. Her persistence was her only weapon against the encroaching silence, her resolve the only thing keeping Van's story alive. It was during one of these solitary drives along a desolate road that Emily received an unexpected call. It was from a former associate of Jake's, someone who had heard whispers about her search. He spoke in hushed tones, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "I knew Jake," the voice said, gravelly and cautious. "He was always talking about his next big score. Had a way of vanishing and reappearing with more money than a man like him should have." Emily's heart quickened. "Do you know where he is now?" A pause, then a sigh. "I heard he was seen in Anchorage a few years back. Might be he's laying low. But there's something you ought to know. Jake had dealings with some rough types, people you don't want to cross." The line clicked dead before Emily could ask more, leaving her with a mix of hope and dread. She knew she was on the right path, but the shadows she was chasing were deeper than she had anticipated. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the road, Emily felt the weight of the years pressing down on her. The silence that had enveloped Van's case was beginning to crack, ever so slightly. But with every step forward came the realization that she was treading dangerous waters, where the past and present could collide with unpredictable force. The next morning, determined to unravel the mystery of Jake Holloway, Emily set out for Anchorage, unaware that every mile brought her closer to not just answers, but also to the perilous truths that had remained hidden for too long. The silence was breaking, and soon the echoes of the past would demand to be heard. As Emily drove towards Anchorage, the road stretched interminably ahead, a ribbon of asphalt slicing through the vast, untamed wilderness of Alaska. Each mile was a journey through the memories she had fought so hard to keep alive. The years of searching had taken their toll, but the call had reignited a flicker of hope, a possibility that the silence might finally be broken. In the years following Van's disappearance, the world had continued its relentless march forward. The seasons changed, children grew up, and the community, once so invested in the search, had gradually moved on. The rescue pilot's vanishing act had become a whispered legend in the town, a ghost story told around campfires, a cautionary tale of the ruthless wilderness. For Emily and her family, however, time had stood still. Every holiday, every birthday, marked by Van's absence, was a wrenching reminder of the void he had left behind. Emily's parents had aged visibly during those years, their faces etched with lines of worry and grief. Her mother had taken to gardening, finding solace in nurturing life, while her father had thrown himself into his work, a futile attempt to distract from the pain. Despite the passage of time, Emily had never stopped searching. She had turned her pain into purpose, launching her own investigation when the official one had grown cold and forgotten. The police had long since closed their files, labeling the case unsolvable, but Emily had refused to let Van's memory fade into obscurity. Her search had taken her down countless dead ends and false leads. She had spoken to anyone who claimed to have seen or heard anything, no matter how implausible. She had learned to navigate the murky waters of unofficial channels, where whispers and rumors were the currency of truth. She had even hired a private investigator, but his efforts had yielded nothing but frustration. Through it all, the family had remained a steadfast pillar of support, their bond strengthened by shared grief. They had become adept at reading between the lines of each other's silences, offering comfort in unspoken understanding. Still, the years of uncertainty gnawed at their hearts, leaving scars that no amount of time could heal. Now, Emily's journey to Anchorage felt like a culmination of all those years of struggle, a desperate gambit to unearth the truth buried beneath layers of time and deception. As she entered the city, the familiar sights and sounds were a stark contrast to the isolation of her quest. Here, life thrived in a cacophony of movement and color, indifferent to her private battle. Emily parked her car and took a moment to steady herself. The city held secrets. She was sure of it. Somewhere among its bustling streets and shadowed alleys lay the key to unraveling Van's disappearance. Her resolve hardened. She would not leave without answers. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a sense of purpose guided her steps. Each person she passed was a potential ally or adversary, each corner a new opportunity to uncover a fragment of the past. Her thoughts returned to Jake Holloway, the elusive figure whose name had resurfaced like a specter from the depths of her investigation. The years had been long and unforgiving, but Emily had learned to be patient, to listen for the whispers in the silence. And as she moved through the city, she felt those whispers growing louder, guiding her towards the truth that had eluded her for so long. Little did she know, the answers she sought were closer than she realized, waiting in the most unexpected of places, ready to shatter the silence that had defined her life for far too long. Emily navigated the bustling streets of Anchorage, each step echoing with the weight of 2 decades of unanswered questions. Her father's watch, pulled from the ocean depths by unsuspecting fishermen, had reignited a hope that had flickered for years but never extinguished. It was a tangible connection to Van, a whisper from the past urging her forward. As the days turned into weeks, Emily delved deeper into the city's undercurrents, exploring avenues both official and obscure. The police files on her father's case had long since been relegated to cold storage, forgotten amidst the myriad of other unsolved mysteries that haunted Alaska's vast, untamed wilderness. But Emily was relentless, her determination fueled by the years of silent suffering her family had endured. Back home, the family continued to rally around one another. Emily's mother, Sarah, maintained a quiet strength, her sorrow a constant companion, but her love for Van undiminished. She found solace in small rituals, lighting a candle by Van's photograph each evening, writing letters to him that would never be sent. These acts, though simple, were her way of keeping his memory alive, an anchor in the storm of uncertainty that had engulfed their lives. Emily's brother Tom had taken a different path, channeling his grief into action. He became involved with search and rescue missions, dedicating his life to preventing other families from experiencing the same anguish. Though he rarely spoke of Van, his actions were a testament to his enduring hope that one day they would find closure. The community, once vibrant with search parties and vigils, had moved on. News stories filled the headlines, and Van's disappearance became a footnote in local history. Yet, there were still those who remembered. Old friends would occasionally reach out, sharing a story or a treasured memory, their voices tinged with the same wistful longing that marked Emily's journey. In Anchorage, Emily's investigation led her to a retired detective who had worked on several high-profile cases during his career. His office was a cluttered testament to years spent unraveling the city's darkest secrets. He listened patiently as Emily recounted her father's story, nodding occasionally, his eyes betraying a flicker of recognition. There had been rumors, he admitted. Whispers of a shadowy figure known as Jake Holloway, a man whose name surfaced in connection with various unsolved cases, but always slipped away before authorities could close in. The detective's files contained references to Holloway, but they were vague and inconclusive, a frustratingly tangled web that seemed to lead nowhere. Emily, however, saw a pattern amidst the chaos. She traced Holloway's movements, piecing together a timeline that spanned years and miles. Her resolve was unyielding, driven by the belief that Holloway held the key to her father's fate. As she pored over maps and reports late into the night, a picture began to form. A trail that led not to the bustling streets of the city, but to the isolated fringes of civilization where secrets were easily lost to the wilderness. The silence that had defined her life for so long was beginning to crack, and Emily felt a sense of urgency. The answers she sought were within her grasp, tantalizingly close yet still shrouded in shadow. With each new discovery, the whispers grew louder, guiding her towards a truth she had longed to uncover. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and the shadows of the past were not so easily dispelled. As Emily prepared to follow the trail into the unknown, she knew that the story was far from over. The years of waiting had taught her patience, but now, the time for action had arrived. The silence was about to be broken, and the truth, long buried, was finally ready to emerge. The years of waiting had been cruel, a silent torment that gnawed at Emily's family, leaving scars deeper than any physical wound. Her mother, once vibrant and full of life, had withered under the weight of uncertainty. Every birthday, every holiday marked another year without answers, another reminder of absence. Her father's empty chair at the dinner table was a constant haunting presence, a symbol of a life interrupted. In those years, the town moved on, as towns often do. New families moved in, children grew up, and the seasons changed. The tale of the rescue pilot who vanished over Alaska became a local legend, whispered about in hushed tones but rarely spoken of aloud. The community had long since accepted the mystery as unsolvable, a chapter closed without resolution. But for Emily, the silence was unbearable. Her father's disappearance was not just a mystery, it was a gaping wound that refused to heal. She dedicated herself to keeping his memory alive, organizing vigils and maintaining a website filled with photos and stories, a digital shrine to a man she refused to forget. Yet the years passed with agonizing slowness, each day blending into the next, a monotonous cycle of hope and despair. Her private investigation became an obsession, a solitary journey through archives and forgotten files. She combed through newspaper articles, interviewed anyone who might remember, and even hired private detectives. But every lead turned cold. Every promising clue evaporated into nothingness. The name Jake Holloway became a ghost she chased in vain, his presence felt but never seen. Emily's quest took her to the fringes of the community, where the wilderness held its secrets tightly. She trekked through dense forests, stood on the icy shores of Alaska, and gazed over the vast, unforgiving ocean that had swallowed her father whole. Each journey was a pilgrimage, a search for closure that remained elusive. The pain of not knowing was compounded by the whispers of doubt that sometimes crept in. Had her father simply vanished, leaving them behind? Had something sinister taken place? These questions lingered, unanswered, casting long shadows over her life. In the quiet moments when the world was still, Emily felt the weight of those years pressing down. Her resolve wavered at times, but the memory of her father's laughter, his stories of daring rescues and adventures, kept her pushing forward. She vowed that the silence would not be the last word. As the town continued to move on, Emily found solace in the memories she held and the community of others who had also lost loved ones to the unknown. Together, they formed a network of support and shared determination, a patchwork quilt of hope stitched from the threads of their collective grief. But just as it seemed the case might remain a cold, unsolved mystery, a whisper of change stirred in the air. Emily's research led her to a long-abandoned cabin on the outskirts of the town, rumored to have been a hideout for those wishing to disappear. Inside, she found a hidden cache of old letters and maps, the edges yellowed with age but still legible. Among the papers was a single photograph, its edges frayed, showing a group of men gathered around a table, their faces shadowed by the dim light. One face stood out to Emily, a face she had seen only in faded family albums, a face she knew as her father's. The silence was beginning to crack, and the truth, long buried, was finally ready to emerge. Emily stared at the photograph, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and disbelief. She traced her fingers over the image, every detail a potential clue. Her father's face, though worn and shadowed, seemed to reach out to her from across the years, silently pleading for the truth to be uncovered. Determined to piece together the puzzle, Emily took the photograph and the letters to the local police station. She was met by a new detective, Detective Harris, who had recently transferred from Anchorage. Unlike others who had brushed off her concerns in the past, Harris listened intently, his eyes narrowing with intrigue as she laid out her findings. Harris had a reputation for solving the unsolvable, his career marked by a tenacity that matched Emily's own. He examined the photograph, noting the details with a practiced eye. The letters and maps hinted at secret meetings and undisclosed transactions, raising more questions than answers. Emily's discovery couldn't have come at a better time. Just weeks before, a breakthrough in forensic technology had been making headlines: genetic genealogy. This new method used DNA to build family trees and identify unknown individuals, even from decades-old evidence. Harris believed it could be the key to unlocking the mystery of her father's disappearance. With Emily's consent, Harris decided to reopen the case. He submitted the contents of the cabin to the forensic lab, focusing on any latent DNA that might be extracted from the letters in the photograph. The stakes were high, and the pressure was immense, but Harris felt a thrill in the chase. For Emily, it was a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had enveloped her family for so long. As they waited for the results, Emily and Harris delved deeper into the lives of the men in the photograph. Who were they? And what connection did they have to her father? The town held its breath, whispers of the reopened case spreading like wildfire. In a place where everyone knew everyone, secrets had a way of surfacing, and the past was never truly buried. Just days later, the lab called with a preliminary report. The DNA analysis had yielded something unexpected, a match to a known felon, recently deceased, who had been linked to organized crime in the area during the time of her father's disappearance. His name was Robert Sloan, a man who had lived on the fringes of society, known for his under-the-table dealings and a penchant for evading the law. Emily's heart raced. Could Sloan be the key to unraveling the mystery? What had he known, and why had it taken so long for his name to surface? The discovery raised as many questions as it answered, but it was a start, a vital piece of the puzzle finally falling into place. With the new lead, Harris and Emily pressed on, their resolve strengthened. The truth felt closer than ever, a tantalizing beacon on the horizon. But as they delved deeper, they realized the path ahead was fraught with danger and deception. The stakes were higher than ever, and the shadows of the past were closing in, threatening to obscure the light of the truth they so desperately sought. As Emily clutched the photograph, the faces of the men seemed to taunt her, their secrets hidden just out of reach. But she vowed to uncover them no matter the cost. The silence would be shattered, and her father's story would finally be told. Emily sat in the dimly lit room, the photograph crumpled slightly in her hand. The faces of the men stared back at her, their identities shrouded in mystery, their secrets buried in a long-forgotten past. Yet, the revelation of Robert Sloan's connection had injected a surge of hope into the investigation. If she could unravel his ties, perhaps the truth about her father's disappearance would finally come to light. As days turned into nights, Emily and Harris combed through the scant records available on Sloan. His name, once whispered in the underbelly of the town, was now spoken openly, each mention laced with intrigue and fear. The pieces of his life were scattered, like shards of a shattered mirror, reflecting the darkness he had navigated with impunity. Then, a breakthrough. Emily received a call from Detective Reynard, a seasoned investigator who had recently taken an interest in cold cases. His voice crackled with determination over the phone. "I believe we have a new lead, Emily. Something that might tie Sloan to your father." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "There's a new forensic technology, genetic genealogy. We've been able to pull DNA from personal items we didn't know existed until recently. One of Sloan's old associates on his deathbed mentioned a hidden stash of Sloan's belongings." "And you found something?" "Yes, a handkerchief with a bloodstain. We've processed it and matched it to a distant relative of your father." Emily's mind raced, a whirl of emotions flooding her senses. A relative? Could this mean? "It means there's a familial link," Reynard continued. "This technology has allowed us to trace connections through family trees, even when direct samples aren't available. But how does this connect to my father? We're not entirely sure yet, but the genetic link suggests Sloan knew your father more than we previously thought, possibly through family or close ties. It's the first solid connection we've had." Emily's thoughts drifted to the photograph once more, the men in it suddenly more than just strangers. What if one of them was the link she sought? Harris, who had been listening intently, chimed in, his voice steady. "We need to dig into Sloan's past, his connections. If there's a familial tie, it could be the key to understanding what happened." Reynard agreed. "I'm reopening the investigation with full force. This technology is our best shot at unraveling the truth, not just about your father, but about the network of secrets Sloan was a part of." Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows of doubt and despair that had loomed over her for 2 decades began to recede, replaced by a sliver of hope. The darkness might finally give way to light. As they ended the call, Emily knew the path ahead would be arduous, fraught with potential dangers and unsettling truths. But she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The silence that had suffocated her for so long would be broken, and her father's story would be told. Yet as she pondered the next steps, a lingering question gnawed at her mind. What exactly did Robert Sloan know, and why had he kept it hidden all these years? The answer, she felt, was closer than ever, waiting to be uncovered in the tangled web of his shadowy past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an amber glow over Anchorage, Emily stood by the window, her mind a storm of thoughts. The revelation of a familial connection to Sloan was a beacon in the murky waters of her father's disappearance, but it also opened a Pandora's box of questions and fears. She knew the coming days would demand every ounce of her resilience. The next morning, Emily met Reynard and Harris at the precinct. The atmosphere was charged with urgency. Reynard, a seasoned detective with a reputation for tenacity, had taken a personal interest in the case. He was joined by Dr. Eliza Turner, a genetic genealogist whose groundbreaking work had unraveled the mysteries of countless cold cases. Eliza began, her voice calm but resolute. We've identified several potential relatives of Sloan through the DNA samples. It's a painstaking process, but each match brings us closer to understanding his network. Emily leaned forward, her heart pounding. How long until we have something concrete? Eliza exchanged a glance with Reynard before responding. We're close, Emily. We've found a second cousin who might have information. But it's not just about finding relatives. It's piecing together their stories, their connections to Sloan and by extension to your father. Reynard nodded. In the meantime, we've been digging into Sloan's past. His financials, his known associates. There's a trail, albeit faint, that suggests he was involved in something far larger than we ever imagined. Smuggling, perhaps. Goods people. We're not sure yet. Harris, ever analytical, interjected. The key is understanding why your father was involved. Was he a threat to Sloan, a partner, or just an unfortunate bystander? Emily felt the weight of their words. Her father, a rescue pilot with a heart for adventure, had been an enigma even in life. Did he stumble upon something he shouldn't have, or was he pulled into a web beyond his control? As they spoke, a call came through for Reynard. He excused himself, stepping out momentarily. When he returned, his expression was grave yet determined. We may have another lead. A former associate of Sloan's, Patrick Grayson, is in a hospice. He's on the brink of death and wants to confess something. He specifically asked for someone connected to the pilot who vanished over Alaska. Emily's pulse quickened. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? The thought of confronting a man who might hold answers to her father's fate was both terrifying and exhilarating. Reynard's voice cut through her thoughts. Emily, I know this is a lot to ask, but would you be willing to meet him? He might be more open with someone who has a personal stake in this. She hesitated, the enormity of the moment pressing down on her. But she knew what she had to do. Yes, I'll go. If there's a chance he can shed light on what happened, I need to hear it. As they prepared to leave, the room buzzed with a sense of impending revelation. The path they were on was fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time in years, it felt like they were closing in on the truth. Outside, the sky was overcast, a reflection of the turbulent emotions swirling within Emily. As they drove to the hospice, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answers she sought were near, waiting to be unearthed by the unraveling of Sloan's secretive past. But as they neared their destination, a haunting question lingered. Would Grayson reveal the truth? Or was he merely another piece in a puzzle that spanned decades and continents, shrouded in layers of deception and betrayal? The hospice loomed ahead, a somber building set against the darkening sky. Emily's heart pounded with anticipation and dread as they approached. She glanced at Reynard, who gave her an encouraging nod. They were about to step into a world of secrets, and she could only hope that Grayson held the key to unlocking them. Inside, The atmosphere was hushed, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and the quiet sounds of beeping monitors. They were led to a small, dimly lit room where Patrick Grayson lay propped up in a bed, his frail frame swathed in blankets. His eyes were closed, and for a moment Emily feared they were too late. But as they entered, his eyes fluttered open, fixing on Emily with surprising clarity. "You must be the pilot's daughter," he rasped, his voice a mere whisper. "I have something you need to hear." Emily stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, I'm Emily. Please, tell me what you know." Grayson took a shuddering breath, his gaze distant, as if recalling a long-buried memory. "It was supposed to be a simple job," he began, his voice gaining strength. "Sloan was ambitious, always looking for an edge. He stumbled onto something big." Emily exchanged a quick glance with Reynard, who was listening intently. "Sloan wasn't supposed to be on that flight," Grayson continued. "He switched places with another pilot at the last minute, said it was an emergency. But it was a setup. They were after him, not the plane." Emily's mind raced. Who was after him? Grayson coughed, his face contorting with pain. The company he worked for, front for something else. Arms dealing, espionage. "I don't know everything." But Sloan found out. He thought he could outsmart them. Reynard leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you know who was behind it, Grayson? Who orchestrated the disappearance?" Grayson hesitated, his breathing labored. "There's a name," he murmured, his eyes beginning to close again. A name whispered in dark corners. Marcus Kettering. Knew him as the orchestrator, the puppet master. But I can't say more." Emily felt a chill run through her. The name meant nothing to her, but the weight of Grayson's words was undeniable. They had a lead, a name, a direction. But was it too late? As Grayson slipped back into unconsciousness, Emily and Reynard exchanged a look. There was urgency in their mission now, a sense that the truth was within reach. But Marcus Kettering was still a mystery, a shadowy figure cloaked in layers of deceit. Outside, the sky had darkened further, mirroring the deepening intrigue of the case. As they left the hospice, Emily's mind was a whirl of questions. Who was Marcus Kettering? What role did he play in her father's disappearance? And most importantly, how would they find him before it was too late? The answers danced just out of reach, but Emily knew one thing for certain. The past was catching up, and the truth was closer than ever. The rain pattered softly against the car window as Emily and Reynard drove in silence. The name Marcus Kettering echoed in Emily's thoughts, a specter she couldn't shake. She glanced at Reynard, who was deep in thought, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We need to dig deeper into Kettering," Emily finally said, breaking the silence. "If he's the orchestrator, there's got to be a trail, something we missed." Reynard nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. Grayson's revelations had opened a new path, but it was shrouded in uncertainty. They needed more than just a name. Back at the office, the air was thick with anticipation. Emily and Reynard gathered around a table strewn with documents and photos. Reynard flipped open a laptop, typing furiously. They needed connections, patterns, anything that could lead them to Marcus Kettering. The hours stretched on, the room lit only by the glow of monitors. Emily sifted through pages of financial records, corporate filings, and old newspaper clippings. Reynard dug into government databases, searching for any mention of Kettering's name. Then, a breakthrough. Reynard's voice cut through the quiet. "Got something." Emily leaned over, her heart quickening. Reynard pointed to a document on the screen, a list of defense contracts awarded to a company named North Star Technologies. Marcus Kettering was listed as a senior advisor. Emily's eyes widened. North Star was a major player in the defense industry, known for its cutting-edge technology and, more intriguingly, its shadowy dealings. "This is it," Emily whispered. "If Kettering is involved with North Star, it could be the link we need. We have to find out more about his role there." Reynard nodded, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm pulling up everything I can on North Star. We need to know who else is involved and how deep this runs." As they worked, a pattern began to emerge. North Star's dealings were extensive, stretching across continents and cloaked in secrecy. Contracts with foreign governments, unexplained financial transfers, and connections to intelligence agencies. It was a tangled web, and Marcus Kettering was at its center. Emily's mind raced. If Kettering was orchestrating Sloane's disappearance, it was likely linked to something much larger, a conspiracy that spanned years and involved powerful players. Suddenly, a new piece of information flashed on the screen. Reynard's eyes widened in disbelief. "Emily, look at this." He pointed to an internal memo from North Star, dated just weeks before Sloane's disappearance. It mentioned a project called Operation Nightfall, with Kettering's name scrawled at the bottom as the lead coordinator. "Operation Nightfall," Emily repeated, the words heavy with implication. What was it? And how did it connect to her father? Reynard's voice was urgent. "We need to find out what Nightfall was. If it ties back to your father, it could be the key to everything." Emily nodded, determination hardening her resolve. They were close, so close to unraveling the truth. But with each answer came new questions, and the specter of Marcus Kettering loomed ever larger. As the night deepened, Emily and Reynard pressed on, driven by the promise of justice in the shadows of the past. The truth was within reach, yet it remained elusive, slipping through their fingers like sand. But Emily knew one thing. She wouldn't stop until she uncovered the full story, no matter the cost. Outside, the storm raged on, a fitting backdrop to the tempest of revelations unfolding inside. The clock was ticking, and Emily felt the weight of it with every passing second. The truth was out there, hidden in the depths, and she was determined to bring it to light. As the storm howled outside, Emily and Reynard huddled over the computer, their eyes scanning document after document. Each piece of data was a breadcrumb leading them closer to the heart of Operation Nightfall. The memo had been the first tangible link, but they needed more. A smoking gun that would connect Kettering directly to her father's disappearance. Reynard's fingers flew over the keyboard, bypassing firewalls and encrypted files. His expertise in digital forensics was unmatched, and tonight, it was their lifeline. Emily watched in silence, her mind racing with the possibilities. What was Nightfall? A mission, a cover-up? The pieces were there, scattered like a jigsaw puzzle waiting to be assembled. Suddenly, Reynard paused. His screen displayed a list of names associated with Operation Nightfall. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she recognized one of them, General Thomas Whitaker, a high-ranking officer with long-standing ties to North Star. Whitaker had been a family friend, someone her father had trusted implicitly. Reynard leaned back, his voice steady but urgent. "Whitaker's involvement changes everything. He's not just a participant, he's one of the architects. We need to dig deeper into his communications." Emily nodded, her mind flashing back to childhood memories, barbecues, family gatherings, moments where Whitaker had been like an uncle to her. The sense of betrayal was palpable, but she buried it beneath her growing resolve. This was about her father, about justice. As Reynard sifted through encrypted emails, a pattern began to emerge. Coded exchanges between Whitaker and Kettering discussing logistics and extractions. One email in particular stood out. It was dated the night before Sloane's last flight, referencing a diversion plan and a location in the Alaskan wilderness. Emily's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment they'd been searching for. The diversion plan must have been the means to orchestrate the disappearance. But why? And what role did her father play that made him a target? Reynard's eyes widened as he decrypted another layer of data. "Emily, look at this. It's a financial transfer. A substantial amount moved to an offshore account in her father's name, but initiated by Kettering. It was a setup, a way to implicate Sloane in something he had no part of. The implications were staggering. Emily's father had been made a scapegoat, his disappearance a carefully calculated move in a larger game. But the question remained, what was at stake that required such drastic measures? Reynard continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are close. We just need confirmation, something irrefutable that ties Kettering and Whitaker to the disappearance." As if on cue, an alert popped up on Reynard's screen, a newly decrypted file labeled Project Summary. They exchanged a look, breathless with anticipation. Emily took a deep breath as Reynard opened the file. The words within could change everything. Would they finally uncover the truth about Operation Nightfall? Each second felt like an eternity as the document loaded, inching them closer to the revelation that could finally bring justice to her father and shine a light on the shadowy figures who had manipulated his fate. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge from the darkness. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the computer. As the document loaded, the words on the screen began to assemble a narrative so sinister it seemed almost unfathomable. Operation Nightfall was more than a simple diversion. It was a meticulously crafted scheme to reroute Sloan's rescue mission under the guise of a humanitarian effort, masking the extraction of illicit goods from a remote Alaskan site. Emily and Reynard leaned closer, their eyes scanning the text with growing horror. The document revealed that Whitaker, a beloved community figure known for his charitable deeds and warm demeanor, was the mastermind behind the operation. His public persona, that of a devoted church elder and philanthropist, stood in stark contrast to the shadowy manipulator orchestrating clandestine missions for financial gain. The file detailed how Whitaker had used his influence to recruit Kettering, a seemingly innocuous logistics coordinator, to manage the operational details. Together, they ensured that anyone who got too close to the truth was either silenced or discredited, weaving a web of deceit that spanned decades. Emily's heart raced as she pieced together the timeline. Whitaker had been hiding in plain sight, using his community standing to deflect suspicion, all the while continuing to operate from the shadows. The revelation was both shocking and infuriating. How could someone so trusted have orchestrated such treachery? Reynard's voice cut through the silence, composed yet charged with urgency. "We need to act fast, Emily. This is enough to bring them in, but we need to ensure they can't worm their way out of this with more lies." Emily nodded, determination replacing the initial shock. They had the evidence, but they needed to strike while the iron was hot. With the authorities alerted and the evidence meticulously compiled, the net was closing in. As dawn began to break, casting a pale light through the window, the scene shifted. Uniformed officers moved with purpose, converging on Whitaker's residence. The once quiet neighborhood was now abuzz with the murmurs of disbelief and betrayal. Neighbors watched from their windows, faces etched with confusion and concern. Whitaker emerged, his face a mask of feigned innocence, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The game was up. He was handcuffed and led to the waiting patrol car, his facade crumbling under the weight of the truth. Kettering, too, was apprehended, his protestations of innocence drowned out by the mounting evidence against him. The community was left reeling, grappling with the duality of a man they thought they knew. Emily watched as the cars drove away, a mix of emotions swirling within her. There was a sense of justice, of vindication, but also an aching sadness for the years lost and the trust shattered. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the path ahead, Emily knew there was still one final chapter to unfold. The confession. Would they finally hear the truth from Whitaker's own lips? Would he reveal the full extent of his machinations and the reasons behind them? The story was reaching its crescendo, but there were still pieces to fit into this intricate puzzle. The world was watching, waiting for the final resolution and the answers that had eluded them for so long. Inside the sterile confines of the interrogation room, Whitaker sat, hands now free of cuffs but weighed down by the impending gravity of his situation. A single bulb cast a stark light over the table, highlighting every furrow in his brow, every bead of sweat that betrayed his composure. Across from him, the lead investigator, a seasoned veteran with eyes that had seen too much, leaned forward, voice calm yet firm. "Whitaker, we need to understand why. Why did you do it? Why did you betray the trust of so many? The family, the community?" For a moment, silence reigned, thick and oppressive. Whitaker's gaze dropped to the table, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on its surface. Then, with a voice that was strangely devoid of the bravado he'd once carried, he began to speak. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. It was a scheme, a scam. But then it spiraled. We never meant for anyone to get hurt. The investigator pressed on, seeking clarity amidst the vagueness. But what about the pilot? What about Jacob? He was just doing his job. Whitaker hesitated, a shadow of regret crossing his features. Jacob was... He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. We needed a fall guy, a distraction. It got out of hand. As the confession unfurled, the tangled web of deceit and desperation became clear. Whitaker and Kettering had orchestrated a complex insurance fraud, one that required a scapegoat when their plans began to unravel. Jacob, with his routine flights and trusted position, had been the perfect pawn, until he wasn't. In the adjacent room, separated by a one-way mirror, Emily listened, heart heavy with a bittersweet mix of justice served and the irrevocable loss of innocence. Her brother's name had finally been cleared, but at what cost? The trial was swift, the evidence damning. Whitaker's admission, coupled with the physical proof painstakingly gathered by Emily and the investigative team, left little room for doubt. The verdict, guilty on all counts, brought a sense of closure to many, though the scars of betrayal would linger. At the sentencing, Jacob's family faced Whitaker, their expressions a blend of grief and resolution. The judge's voice was steady as he delivered the sentence. Life, without parole. Kettering received a similar fate, his attempt at a plea deal thwarted by his accomplice's full confession. In the aftermath, the community struggled to reconcile the image of the man they had known with the reality of his actions. Trust, once broken, was slow to rebuild. Yet amidst the heartache, there was hope, a renewed commitment to vigilance, to community, to ensuring that such darkness could not take root again. Emily, standing at the shores where Jacob's watch had been found, reflected on the journey. Her brother's legacy was no longer that of a missing hero, lost without a trace, but of a man who had been wronged and whose truth had finally been vindicated. The ocean stretched before her vast and unknowable, a reminder of the mysteries still left unsolved, but also of the infinite possibilities for healing and renewal. Justice, she realized, was not just about punishment. It was about remembrance, about honoring those who could no longer speak for themselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that Jacob, wherever he was, had finally found his way home.